Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you so much for making time on your busy afternoons. I really appreciate it. My name is Malek Banat, and I'm here joined today by my colleagues Maria Chupka and Kamil Jaronczyk for this Visegrad Insight online discussion on Ukraine's security aspirations in the Black Sea region and the meaning of the Crimea Platform. It's lovely to have you all here once again. All the speakers are here, so I will go with a quick introduction of the speakers. We have as our first guest panel speaker Bohdan Nahaylo, former senior UN official in the CIS region, joined also by Maria Avdeeva, European Expert Association Research Director, our very own Marcin Zaborowski, Visegrad Insight Senior Associate, and we also have Pavel Havlicek joining us as the first responder, but that will be during the second half. So just to quickly summarize the format, the first half, each speaker will have 10 minutes to give their addresses and remarks, followed by, and this part will be recorded, followed by the rest of the hour for the Q&A section with our guests. Okay, so without further ado, as we all have witnessed, it's been quite a busy week for Ukraine. On Tuesday, Ukraine celebrated its 30th independence. The week started off somewhat shaky. Sunday, German Chancellor Angela Merkel visited Kiev just right after her trip to Russia, visiting Moscow. And that was followed by certainly any clear security guarantees, so no change from the former German stance, which left the Ukrainian side slightly disappointed. And then, however, we turned the page over on Monday. Of course, the first inaugural summit of the Crimea Platform here in Kiev, 46 foreign delegations, including 14 heads of states and top NATO and EU officials, including Deputy Secretary General of NATO and President of the European Council, Charles Michel. And I'd like to start with the following question, which will be addressed to Bohdan in regards to the meaning of the Crimea Platform. So, Bohdan, one of the remarks by President Volodymyr Zelensky was that the actual realization of the summit was a tangible achievement, although we also saw a declaration signed at the end of the summit with all participants, as well as an agreement to coordinate permanent liaisons to the Crimea Platform office here in Kiev. But nonetheless, the actual realization, as he reiterated, was by itself a very important achievement. So what is the significance of it? Can we count this as a diplomatic victory for Ukraine? And to what extent would you say that is in light of Kremlin's hybrid aggression efforts to deter the summit, as well as some mixed signals from key Western partners? Floor is to you, Bohdan. Bohdan, we can't hear you, you're muted.
Yes, can you hear me now? Okay, I'm very sorry. Yes, I think you partly answered your own question by providing the information that you did. I think it was a major success for Zelensky and Ukrainian diplomacy, and there aren't that many victories recently to shout about. The very fact that 46 countries, now 47, I understand New Zealand has joined, were represented, and 14 heads of state. Look, after 7 years after the event, the occupation of Crimea, this was a very timely reminder that the international community has not forgotten about this act of aggression and violation of international law. So I think it was very important that Ukraine mobilized this public expression of continuing concern and engagement for the future in at least contesting Russian actions and Russian ownership. Look, The Black Sea is clearly of major significance and of concern from a security angle for Ukraine, but not only Ukraine. There are several states, there are two aspirants, would-be NATO members, Georgia and Ukraine involved. There is Romania, Bulgaria, and of course, Turkey in the south, who are NATO members. So it's an interface for Ukraine with the Middle East and Asia and Europe, but it's also an interface if you want a new front line for NATO. Turkey has always been in the south, but for Romania, for Bulgaria, this is quite a challenging situation. Let me recall, as somebody coming from Britain, that in the 1850s, there was a war in Crimea, right? And that was about control of the Dardanelles, the Bosphorus. It wasn't simply British imperialism confronting Russian imperialism. There were other countries involved, but basically it was about control of the Black Sea and access to it. And it's ironic that so many years later, we return to a similar sort of situation. Clearly, Ukraine has its own specific concerns. The blocking of the Sea of Azov, the blockage of major ports, Mariupol, for example, through which the coal was exported to other parts of Ukraine and beyond in the past. Crimea, not only its value as real estate, but now militarized and a serious threat in the south to Ukraine. And we sometimes neglect not only the political and military implications, but the economic ones. Behind this, all of this, are the longer term interests that various states have in exploring for the gas deposits that Turkey certainly knows are there and presumably are off the Ukrainian, if not Romanian and other coasts. So potentially that's going to be also an important issue for the future. I'll conclude so as not to, monopolize the discussion. We're just at the beginning of it, to say that I think that for Ukraine, given that it's not a member of NATO, given that it's not a member of the EU, this expression of support, and if you want, the fact that partners as far-ranging as Eastern European ones, but Sweden, Britain, the US have taken it symbolically under its wing for this purpose is very important. It's probably the best that Ukraine can hope for in this interim situation. And of course, as you know, Zelensky is off to Washington on next week, at the beginning of next week. So it sets the stage, and I think it helps psychologically the Ukrainian delegation to say to Biden, look, we know you're preoccupied with Afghanistan and other issues, and you've had your deal with the Germans over Nord Stream 2, but there is serious concern still in Europe. It's not simply symbolic.
Thank you so much for that, Bogdan. And this inspired another question for me. Now, this will be posed to you, Maria, sort of from an international security perspective. Certainly, the Crimea Platform is one of the biggest initiatives on Ukraine's diplomacy side, but it's not the only one from its flagship initiatives. We also have the association trio, the Lublin Triangle. So what I want to ask you, Maria, is that the current Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dmytro Kuleba, he emphasizes sort of the shift in the foreign policy strategy. So we're certainly, the end goal is the same, Euro-Atlantic course. However, the strategy is sort of, make Brussels come to us rather than vice versa as before. How do you interpret and rate this sort of strategy? What are its sorts of limitations? And then back to, in context of the Crimea Platform, what are some of its future roadblocks and limitations that we might see?
I guess that's a very wise thing to do, to make Brussels come to Ukraine and to show Europe and the states why Ukraine is important and why Crimea is important. And Crimean platform, it didn't appear from nothing. It was announced almost a year ago, this initiative, and I'm really glad that Ukraine made it, because as you know, I am researching Russian disinformation and Russian malign influence, and Russia has been very happy to promote narratives that Ukraine will fail with the Crimean platform, and what it initially happened, and when the Kremlin understood that it will be the Ukrainian success, they should have changed their narrative and their story and start to tell something new. So answering to your question, that's a great initiative, and that Crimea platform will, for me, become a basis of future Ukrainian foreign policy, because the question of Crimea is the question of European security, and now Ukraine has a platform where to promote this, and where all other Ukrainian partners and all other countries could unite. And as you probably know, the Crimea platform, it consists of 5 pillars, as Minister Kuleba has said. So one of them is security, the other is sanctions and the efficiency of sanctions against Russia. Also a very important issue, the third one, is human rights, because we witness human rights violation in Crimea all the time, and the situation is worsening there. Fourth is overcoming economic and environmental impact, as Bohdan has already mentioned. And the most important, so the final goal, is that non-recognition of Russia's occupation of Crimea. So the consolidate policy of all the countries, and this final declaration that we have, that's a very good sign that not only our close allies, but all other participants are up to this goal, they are consolidating, and they do not recognize the occupation of Crimea. And that's a very good basis to build the further foreign policy. And Crimea will be, for Ukraine, will allow us to move further with the countering Russian aggression, which doesn't stop. And we will show all the other countries that we have a strategy, and we are moving along that strategy. And we are not asking for constant help, but we are also having the plan, and we want others to support it. And we have clear goals, and we know how to achieve them. And that's, I think, very important. And also by saying this, we make like we do not the Crimea not becomes the deal done, yes, fait accompli. And we also say that we do not recognize this illegal annexation, and there will be no time when Russia could go along with this, and all the time we will insist on that the annexation is illegal, and in some time Ukraine will gain control over the territory. I also wanted to make a couple of statements about Russian disinformation and how it evolved during the preparations to the Crimea platform. So at first, as I have said, when Kremlin had the idea that they could just stop everybody from participating and that will be the failure of Ukrainian foreign policy, they were like humiliating all the participants of the Crimea Platform, and Lavrov, the Minister of Foreign Affairs himself, and the Putin's press secretary and all other top level Kremlin officials, they were telling lies about that this is the Russophobic platform and Ukraine will not go with it and then nothing will come out of it. But then when they understood that it's not working, then they started to promote other narratives, saying that that's only for photos event and no future it has, and well, that it was like only one time conference. And that's why for Ukraine now it's vitally important to keep pushing and to keep going with the Crimea platform, to communicate it on other levels and not to give any chance to Russian propaganda and Russian disinformation to work, and to not to give them any possibility to have the floor, because clearly they already are using all kinds of methods and tools of disinformation to discredit Ukrainian position.
Thank you so much, Maria. Now this last question would be posed to Marcin, the remaining speaker. Marcin, voices from Central Europe. So heads of state were predominantly sent by countries from Central Europe in a remarkable act of solidarity. And during their addresses at the Crimea Platform Summit, we heard a lot of instances of historic references to show empathy towards the Ukraine situation and circumstances. So what I want to ask is, from a Central European perspective, what does Ukraine's drive for a new security architecture in the region mean, and how is Ukrainian leadership perceived in Central Europe?
Well, thank you, Malik. Before I respond to your question, let me just also, respond to some of the points which were raised before, because I tend to see some of the, issues which were highlighted here a little bit differently. I would say that there certainly has been a big success of the Ukrainian diplomacy to actually hold the platform and to remind the world that it is in existence, and to secure a very large, attendance, and also the fact that Charles Michel participated was important. But let's also point out to the fact, and alluding a little bit to what you said, that you had a high-level representation only actually from Central Europe. So it was the presidents of Poland, Lithuania, Moldova, Georgia. Very strangely, also the Greek president actually did come, which was surprising. But other than that, the attendance wasn't at the highest possible level. Yeah? And very importantly, two of the Normandy format nations, France and Germany, sent only not the a meaningful representation, but not a representation which would say that we are making a statement about it. They clearly, they send their representation to say, yes, we don't recognize the annexation of Crimea, we are with the EU on that, but actually we don't particularly want to antagonize Russia here. So they said they did what they had to do, but nothing more than that. Yeah. So that's number one. Point number two, I think that the strategy of make Brussels come to us is completely wrong. And it's not going to work. And this has been actually an issue with the various former Ukrainian administrations before, this kind of assumption that we are this geopolitical center of Europe, that we are between Russia and the EU. We are in such and we have this access to the Black Sea and so on, and it is in the interest of the EU to actually bring us to their sphere of influence. The fact of the matter is that the vast majority of West Europeans do not want to actually know, are not interested, and they do not share this perception of the geopolitical importance of Ukraine. And actually, the vast majority of people normally don't think about these kind of things. So we could see it in a referendum in the Netherlands on this association agreements. The Dutch public opinion didn't buy a geopolitical argument at all. They were not interested in it. So if Ukraine will be waiting for the EU to come and draw it to its sphere of influence, it may wait forever, as it's been waiting already. What Ukraine should be doing is to make itself, irresistible to the EU by the speed of its reforms, by the speed of its modernization, the kind of things that Central Europeans did in the 1990s. But many West Europeans can actually live with Ukraine not being in a Western sphere of influence at all. So maybe not Central Europeans, because we are next door, but anything west of us does not particularly care. And I hope that to some extent answers your question.
Thank you, Marcin. Now, great, interesting perspective, really. Now, I think Bohdan would want to make a remark about the limitations of the Crimean platform. He wants to add on as well before we proceed to the more informal Q&A where the recording will stop. Bohdan, floor is yours.
Yeah, 2 or 3 quick comments. Thank you to the previous speaker, Martin. I think that's a very sober assessment. Possibly a little bit too negative in the sense that, look, Britain and Ukraine have signed a strategic partnership agreement, unprecedented, something that perhaps Zelensky could essentially beg Washington for. So we didn't really need a high-level representation from London, but I think the Prime Minister of Sweden was there, unexpected. The head of the Parliament of Switzerland was there, unexpected. That's high enough. And yes, you're right that for most of Western Europe, of course, the conflict in Ukraine is not on the radar screen, which brings me to the broader issue of the conflict, because of course it's not just about Crimea, it's about aggression in southeast Ukraine, in the Donbass, not to mention Transnistria and Georgia, etc. But I think one of the weaknesses from my point of view of the platform is that it buys into the narrative that was imposed on Ukraine in Minsk, in the Minsk Accord by Russia, separating off its aggression in eastern Ukraine by using the argument that what's happening in Donbass is a purely internal matter, a civil war, if you want, and that Russia is a mediator and not a party to the conflict. For some reason, I don't see any reference, even in the declaration of the platform, that Crimea, its occupation, and the desire to deoccupy it is part of a broader problem, one of Russian aggression, which has appeared in many areas. So I think the weakness, as I say, to reiterate, is that the declaration and the initiative has unwittingly emphasized the Russian narrative as opposed to emphasizing the legal narrative and the one that Europe has supported in backing Ukraine, that Russian aggression, wherever it takes place, is impermissible.
Thank you, Bohdan. We have just a few minutes. Maria, maybe you would like to comment?
Yeah, my comment is that I think it's a very dangerous tactic not to support Ukraine in order not to tease or irritate Mr. Putin. And it's very clear for me that you cannot appease the aggressor, and next time he will come after your territory. And I think that our European partners understand that very well, that Ukraine for this period of since 2014 is taking taking all the Russian aggression on us, and that by promoting and by supporting Ukraine on Crimea issue, everybody is making step in order to make the whole Europe more secure, and especially the Black Sea region, because of course you know that when Russia built up troops in spring on the borders with Ukraine, the most of the troops were concentrated in Crimea, and also the nuclear weapons are there. And by making the sense that nothing is going on, and that it's only the Ukrainian kind of deal, I don't think that Russia would be stopped there and will be ready to just to have only Crimea and only Donbass, and they will move further. And what we see now is the more aggressive foreign policy all the time.
Last quick remark by Bohdan before we
very briefly, I think for the context, we need to mention that it's not simply what Ukraine has done through the platform. I mean, remember, not so long ago, we had the NATO Sea Breeze exercise. I think that was of major importance also. It sent a very strong signal and to Moscow, and I think it should not be neglected. I think that it's the composition of these various efforts that are coming together that will be important. And I think also the unilateral action, perhaps agreed with other partners behind the scenes, and that was when the British warship, challenged the Russians, essentially saying, look, these are international territorial waters, they are not Russian waters. So all these little things together with the platform are what should be making a difference for the longer term.
I promised the last remark by Marcin, and then we proceed.
Just very briefly to what Maria said, I think that I absolutely agree with you that letting Russia get away with breaking international law in bilateral agreements is creating an extremely dangerous precedence, and those countries who feel it are those who are in Russia's and Ukraine direct vicinity. And these are Georgians, Moldovans, Lithuanians, and these are those who sent highest level delegation to the Crimea platforms. For the others, it is a distant issue. Let's also don't kid ourselves that for a lot of people, geopolitics and actually foreign policy is not the bread and butter issue of the day.
Thank you for that, Marcin. So now we'll proceed to the less formal part, the Q&A section, where Pavel will be the first respondent, and we already had one question. The question is as follows: could Greece look at the Crimea platform for a place to talk about Cyprus, as Turkey also participated? Pavel?
Thank you so much. Malik, maybe I would not start with the very question, but first start with some of the interventions that I listened to very carefully.
Of course.
Let me first of all just comment to some of the words, provocative words of Marcin, if I may, because obviously coming from Central Europe as well as Marcin, I would say that at least for our region, geopolitics still matters, and we have seen that. We have seen the Polish president coming over. We have seen the second highest constitutional representative from Czechia coming over. We have seen even the Hungarian president, right? That was a surprise, maybe to some, coming to Kiev as well. So just imagine 7 years after the illegal occupation, that you bring more than 40 heads, representatives of the international community to an issue that is a long burden, which is considered fatigue, Ukrainian fatigue, Crimea fatigue, for such a long time. So this week I consider to be a big success for Ukraine. In any case, that you bring so many people to discuss this painful issue that we have been with for the last 7 years. This is quite something, I feel. So that's first. Second, and this goes in line with what Maria was mentioning, about the sort of a security component, and also that goes back to the words, if Europe is supposed to come to Kiev or the other way around. I think this process needs to be mutual, right? So obviously the world community, and especially the West, has invested significantly in Ukraine over the last 7 years, both in the sort of security component, but also financially for the reform efforts, which Ukraine has clearly only delivered partially. We have seen some of the reform efforts moving forward, including most recently on the rule of law, but there is still a lot to be done. We have seen that also basically singled out by the European Commission and its own sort of assessment of the Eastern partner countries, including Ukraine. So there is still much to be done. And there might be new promises actually coming after the end of the year and the Eastern Partnership Summit that is awaiting us at the end of the year. So here, obviously, the EU has tried and the West has tried to invest in Ukraine. And I think Ukraine gave quite something back, so that is not only the issue that is often reminded by the Ukrainian side, that Ukraine is today, in fact, protecting the rest of Europe from Russia. That is so true. We have seen that on so many accounts, be that very physically in the military realm, but also in sharing the know-how that Ukraine has gained over the last 7 years in the hybrid warfare against Russia. There are now very frequent contacts from Poland, from Czechia, from the Baltic states that are going to Kiev actually to learn how to best prepare, for similar aggression of Russia against their own countries. So this is what Ukraine has been giving back, So this process is clearly mutual, and we need each other today more than ever, probably. So this is point number 2. Also, there is a sort of a sub point to it, the Black Sea security. We have seen NATO and EU investing so much more. It is not only the famous concept of resilience, which both NATO and EU are investing so significantly. It's going to become the next framework for EU's relations with Ukraine and the other EAP countries. That is one thing, but also NATO is investing in Ukraine a lot. It is now a privileged partner within the countries outside of the alliance. That is another very important step that we are taking right now. So here, obviously, the Western community is paying very close attention towards Black Sea region, and this is important. And this is also part of the success of Zelensky, I would say. So he managed to move beyond how Mr. Poroshenko has managed to internationalize the aggression of Russia against Ukraine. So this is something very important, to come up with fresh ideas. And this is exactly the idea of the Crimean Platform. It is not the one-off conference. That is just very illustrative how Russia pays close attention, to it. Just trying to blackmail the participating countries, to try to undermine either in the information sphere or otherwise, by diplomatic channels, the whole concept, So this is how clearly Russia is interested and paying close attention. Don't forget that Russia itself is having elections in the middle of September, which is supposed to take place, obviously, in the occupied Crimea as well. So that is why all these developments are very important, and the issue of Crimea is very, very sensitive. So this is all very, very important in this context as well. So I will stop right here with these 3 points that I wanted to mention. Maybe try to move the discussion a little bit further from what I have heard so far, but I will be very happy to comment on other points as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul.